Music theory is amazing because the more you get into it, the more you see it's full of surprises. And by far one of the most important and unexpected things about theory is the way that it's naturally organized into 3 main levels. So in this video, I'm going to show you what these levels are. To be clear, by levels, I don't mean skill level in playing different guitar solos or some cliche like that. And also by music theory, I'm not talking about classical music or traditional notation, which actually obscures the levels we're going to look at here. By levels of music theory, what I mean are 3 levels of patterns that all layer on top of each other to form the essential framework of music. And once you see how these patterns are connected and how they work together, you can't unsee it. So to begin, let's start with the most basic pattern of all, the chromatic scale. These are the 12 notes of music laid out in order. And though we could repeat them across multiple octaves like this, we'll focus on just one set here, wrapping it into a closed loop to show that it can cycle on forever. Now already we're getting into territory where traditional notation can't go, picturing music like this. So the 3 levels of theory that we're going to look at here will be new to your friends who are classically trained. Anyway, to get to the first one, the first level, it helps to gain a better look at the connections between the notes in this pattern. So to do this, let's first rearrange the notes into another fundamental pattern in music called the circle of fifths. These are the same 12 notes as before, but rearranged into their natural harmonic order, where each note is beside the ones that are most closely related to it in music. C is harmonically close to F and G, for example, while G is related to C and D. D is naturally connected to G and A, etc. This structure is the same throughout. In fact, to picture these close harmonic relationships, we can use color like this, where each note is nestled between its neighbors, right at home here in the circle of fifths. A, orange yellow, is between D, orange, and E, yellow. E, yellow, is between A, orange yellow, and B, yellow green, and so on. And here's where it gets especially interesting, because when you rotate this pattern back into the chromatic scale where we began, you can still see the harmonic relationships baked into the notes. The C note, for example, is still closely connected to notes F and G. They're just at a distance now. In the same way that G is still linked to notes C and D, and how D is tied to G and A, etc., where these relationships are symmetrical all around the circle. Seeing the chromatic scale in this way, that it's really just a rearrangement of the circle of fifths, is insightful, and we haven't even gotten to the first level of music theory. But we're about to, so check this out. The connection between the circle of fifths and the chromatic scale highlights an important feature of music theory, which is that it's fundamentally cyclical in nature, and that it's also geometric. When you trace the lines between the notes that are related, an obvious symmetry stands out, where successive fifth notes form a perfect star pattern like this, or in reverse, successive fourths form the same pattern. These musical patterns display an inherent geometry that you not only hear, but can also see. And what's cool is that all of the other intervals in music also form their own consistent patterns, which leads us to the different levels of theory. To show you what I mean, let's focus on the key of C, for example, where C is the tonic, or interval 1. And then from there, all of the other notes are labeled with their own scale degrees. D is 2, E is 3, and so on to mark the notes in the major scale. And then the other notes are marked with their own numbers as well, like flat 2, flat 3, etc. Because any note can be the tonic or scale degree 1 here, we could rotate these numbers to align with any note. But still focusing on the key of C as our example, let's use these numbers and the geometry of music to reveal all the symmetries between the notes. You've already seen how C is connected to F and G from their relationship in the circle of fifths. But what's cool is that you can trace lines from the tonic 1 to all of the other notes as well, and an interesting symmetry appears. Between the tonic and its tritone flat 5 is a straight line, where these two notes are polar opposites or complementary colors, red and green, or C and G flat, flat in this example. And then fanning out from there, on either side are lines of equal length. Flanking the tritone are intervals 4 and 5 in the key, which are equidistant from the tonic. Then you have intervals 3 and flat 6, which are symmetrical to each other, and then intervals flat 3 and 6, intervals 2 and flat 7, and finally flat 2 and 7. Each pair of intervals is symmetrical around the key's tonic, scale degree 1. And since all keys have this same structure, when you rotate these lines around the chromatic scale, they all combine to form an intricate web of connections, where together all of the tritones form a kind of asterisk of musical connections, all of the intervals of 4 and 5 form a star, intervals 3 and flat 6 in all keys create a structure of interconnected triangles, intervals flat 3 and 6 form a grouping of squares, 2 and flat 7 make intertwined hexagons, and finally intervals flat 2 and 7 make one big 12-sided dodecagon. Together, these 6 symmetries form the essential framework of music, and this geometry is where the 3 levels of music theory come in, where specifically these patterns, the seconds and sevenths, are used in level 1, scales. These patterns of thirds and sixths are used in level 2, chords, and these patterns of fourths and fifths are used in level 3, progressions. In other words, in geometric terms, musical scales, the most basic patterns, are based on this dodecagon and these hexagons. Chords, which are harmonically more advanced, are built from these squares and triangles, and progressions, the highest musical structures, are informed by these geometric stars. So incrementally, each set of symmetries is used to create ever more sophisticated patterns. It's awesome. To explain, and for you to see the practical application of this, let's look at some patterns in the key of C, though of course these same ideas apply to all 12 keys in music. So starting with level 1, scales, let's take the C major scale, for example. Made from a pattern of whole step and half step intervals, this scale sounds nice, and it sounds good because of these particular intervals, where the pattern is more than just a series of whole and half steps. Now that you've seen the underlying geometry of music, you'll recognize that these whole steps are really derived from the hexagons of major seconds and flatted sevenths, while the half steps are part of the dodecagon of flatted seconds and major sevenths. That's really what we're looking at and hearing here. The sonic structure of this scale is based on these musical symmetries, as is the case with all of the modes in music as well, which are also built from the same patterns of hexagons and a dodecagon, like the Dorian mode, for example, and the Aeolian mode, or the minor scale, and so on. Each is constructed of these most basic intervals. That's level 1 of music theory. Moving on to level 2, chords, these patterns, again, are built from the squares of minor thirds and major sixths, and the triangles of major thirds and flatted sixths. Playing the C major chord, for example, you can see how this harmony is made from 3 notes, C, E, and G. Between notes C and E is a major third from this set of triangles, while the interval between E and G is a minor third, which comes from this set of squares. So this chord is made from segments of triangles and squares. Likewise, all of the other chords in this key are derived from the same geometric patterns, including D minor, made from segments of a square and a triangle, E minor, made from the same shapes, F major, same thing, G major, and A minor. Each of these harmonies is built upon this underlying framework of geometric symmetries. That's level 2 of music theory. And finally, looking at level 3, progressions, these patterns arise primarily from the last set here of fourths and fifths. Chord progressions, like the 12-bar blues, for example, are really just a sequence of chords 1, 4, and 5 in a key, which follow this star formation. And as you get into more advanced harmonic movement, playing things like tritone substitutions, you begin to incorporate these geometric patterns as well, which make for even more interesting and nuanced progressions. This is level 3 in music. So together, all of these symmetries combine to form a super pattern of connections, a web of harmonic relationships that inform music theory at every level, where you're playing with the most basic patterns of scales, or the more involved geometries of chords, or combining chords into progressions. And really, we're only scratching the surface here. In my full music theory course, you learn about all of this in much more detail, where we really dive into the geometric framework of music and how it completely informs everything in songwriting, not just for head knowledge, but for you to fully apply these patterns and principles in a practical way, to write your own songs that sound clear and coherent. The course has 20 lessons organized into 5 parts, and I guarantee you've never seen music theory explained in this way. There's a link in the video notes, so definitely check that out. It includes over 14 hours of video, 2,100 pages of lesson materials, 3,300 full-color illustrations, and more. So thank you for watching. Please let the algorithm know if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one.